A very warm welcome. You're watching World 360. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Get set for everything that's making news across the globe this week, from India's sharp reaction towards China and Pakistan to the highly anticipated call between China's Xi Jinping and the US President Joe Biden. We'll bring you all of that. But first up are the headlines. Brief meet on the sidelines of the SCO meet in Tashkent. Foreign ministers of India and Pakistan raised the Kashmir issue. Also, India's Jaishankar welcomes Iran's entry, highlights the importance of the Chabahar port. India angered by China and Pakistan's decision to involve third parties in CPEC projects passing through POK. India reacts sharply, calling the CPEC activities illegal, illegitimate and unacceptable. Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden go on a phone call for over 2 hours. Xi wants Biden to not play with fire over Taiwan. This amid a proposed visit by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. And the WHO declares the highest alert over monkeypox, says US and Europe worst hit. So this week, India's spotlight was on the SCO foreign ministerial meet. The Minister of External Affairs, Mr. S. Jaishankar, attended this meet in Tashkent on Friday. In a first, the Pak Foreign Minister, Bilawal Bhutto, shared the stage with India's External Affairs Minister on the sidelines of this meet. As you can see in that picture that surfaced, both leaders had a brief meeting during which they discussed regional issues including Kashmir, Afghanistan and the Pak-India relationship. CNN News 18 has learnt that Pak's Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto has offered resumption of talks with a new start. According to sources, Mr. Jaishankar has given a positive response but also raised the issue of rising terrorism in Kashmir and India. Another crucial development is Iran's entry to the SCO, a move that has been welcomed by India. In fact, at the SCO meet, Jaishankar highlighted the importance of Iran's Chabahar port. Jaishankar also met his Chinese and Russian counterparts, Wang Yi and Sergei Lavrov, but no bilateral was held. It would be interesting to see how the SCO foreign ministers meet sets the tone for India and China at the upcoming SCO summit in September. This at a time when military talks between New Delhi and Beijing have failed to yield any concrete results. And with that, it's over to our pivot this week. As we all know, the CPEC is part of China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. Now, China and Pakistan have welcomed interested countries to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor projects. But the decision to involve third parties in CPEC has angered India. Here's a report that explains why. Launched in 2013, the CPEC aims to connect Pakistan's Gwadar port on the Arabian Sea with northwest China's Xinjiang. It was at a joint working group meeting of the CPEC that China and Pakistan invited third countries to join the flagship initiative. But here's India's problem. It said participation by any third nation will be considered illegitimate, simply because the CPEC passes through parts of the Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, areas which are under illegal occupation of Pakistan, an issue India has already conveyed to the Chinese side. Moreover, Indian government is of the firm belief that connectivity initiatives must be based on universally recognized international norms. In fact, India's Ministry of External Affairs has released a sharp reaction. It has called the CPEC activities inherently illegal, illegitimate and unacceptable, ones that will be treated accordingly by India.
Occupied Kashmir, as you said, the entire Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir is part of India. तो वो हमारे sovereignty, territorial integrity के खिलाफ है, तो उसमें हम object करते हैं. और दूसरा कि कोई तीसरी देश इसमें ना जुड़े, क्योंकि हम पहले से चेतावनी दे रहे हैं कि हमारे सॉवरेंटी की बात है.
Interestingly, not just India, but many Western nations view the CPEC as a debt trap tool. This used by China to hold member nations hostage. Like Sri Lanka, Pakistan too is facing a serious economic crisis. The reason? High interest rates on CPEC loans, rising project costs, and attacks on CPEC infrastructure. There are some major issues that have turned the China-Pakistan economic corridor into a white elephant dream. But fortunately for India, its consistent position has been endorsed by the West as well. Moreover, they are bolstering India's economic connectivity. In fact, just last month, US President Joe Biden, along with other G7 leaders, unveiled ambitious plans. These to come up with game-changing infrastructure by 2027. The move, seen as a counter to China's BRI, involves funding worth $600 billion. In 2018, the EU too issued a joint communication which highlighted the bloc's strategy for connectivity between Europe and Asia. Moreover, India is also promoting INSTC as a viable alternative to the BRI. The pipe dream connects Russia and India through Iran. Bureau Report, CNN News 18. Whether it is the foreign ministerial meet of the SCO or India's reaction on the CPEC, let's quickly get in a sense of perspective from my guest, Mr. Vishnu Prakash, who is a former diplomat. Thank you, Mr. Prakash, for joining our broadcast today. Let me begin with the SCO foreign ministerial meet. How crucial is this meet, and how is this going to now set the tone to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that will be held next month in Uzbekistan?
Well, as you know, we assumed the presidency of the SCO in September, and we are going to host the summit next year. So I think this will pave the way for the visit of the Prime Minister to Samarkand for the next SCO summit. There is also speculation at the moment about the meetings on the sidelines, which is a matter of conjecture. We'll see how that pans out.
All right. Also, Ambassador Prakash, in June, the IMF had asked Pakistan to renegotiate the CPEC energy deal, suspecting that China has been overcharging Pakistan. Seeing what's already happened in Sri Lanka, whether it's the Hambantota port and now Pakistan, do you think third nations will be wary of getting involved in China's BRI or CPEC, to be more specific?
Well, the problem is that the BRI projects lack transparency, but the developmental needs of the countries' infrastructure needs are very much there. Certain countries have utilized it effectively, but because of corruption, because of due diligence not being done, there are issues. Already, I believe some $50 billion worth of BRI loans are being renegotiated. So this will certainly make more countries cautious, but also depends on the quality of leadership in a country concerned.
All right. Many thanks to you, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, for joining this newscast. And with that, let's now shift our attention over to the much anticipated call between China and the United States. Earlier this week, the US President Joe Biden and China's President Xi Jinping spoke candidly over the phone for 2 hours and 17 minutes. The topics that were discussed ranged from aligning interests to climate change, but the main subject was Taiwan. As we all know, it's been a serious point of conflict for the two superpowers, considering their differing stances on the island of Taiwan. According to Chinese sources, Xi Jinping told Biden, and I quote, "If you play with fire, you get burned." As per the account shared by the White House, on the other hand, Biden emphasized that the US opposes any efforts to undermine peace and stability in Taiwan. This call comes in the backdrop of a possible visit of US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to the island. Whether or not that will pan out, let's also try and find out from our CNN correspondent, Kevin Liptak, who's joining me live from Washington. Thank you, Kevin, for giving us your precious time. Now, a host of factors we are looking at as far as China is concerned, whether it is China's unwillingness to condemn Russia's war in Ukraine or even the issue of espionage and intellectual property disputes. What was the agenda of the call and what were its key sticking points?
Yeah, well, there was quite a wide-ranging agenda for this call between President Biden and President Xi, and I think the top issues are these security concerns in the South and East China Seas, concerns surrounding Taiwan that the President Biden, really wanted to discuss with his counterpart to try and ease some of these tensions and avoid what the U.S. says could be a miscommunication about what's going on in that region. And of course, this is the fifth time that the two men have spoken over the course of President Biden's presidency. And what President Biden wants to do is to establish this regular period of communication for the two men to talk so that essentially there are no surprises, so that these open channels of communication can be maintained so that there isn't some sort of inadvertent conflict in the region, so that Xi feels comfortable enough speaking to President Biden so that these issues can be discussed diplomatically rather than escalating, deteriorating, and breaking out into conflict. And so there are economic issues between the two men that were also discussed. Of course, President Biden is considering lifting some of the tariffs that former President Trump applied on China as he works to ease inflation in the United States. And so these economic concerns were also on the agenda as well. But what White House officials say is that these lengthy conversations are really an opportunity for these two men to touch base, to communicate really person to person, president to president. Of course, they've never met face to face as presidents. President Xi has never left China during the COVID pandemic. What U.S. officials hope is that they could potentially meet before the end of the year, maybe in Asia during a set of summits that are set to take place there in November. President Biden is someone who really values these interpersonal connections with his counterparts. He knows Xi quite well. They met and traveled extensively together when both of them were vice president. And so this is really his opportunity to really talk at what is a very tense moment between the United States and China.
All right, fair enough. Kevin, at the same time, Beijing has been very fiercely critical of a mere prospect of Nancy Pelosi's rumored trip to Taiwan. Keeping the timing in mind, should we now expect the call to calm down the recent escalation after China threatened serious consequences if Pelosi visits Taiwan, not to forget the warning that has been extended by Xi Jinping over the phone call?
It was certainly President Biden's goal to ease some of these tensions. And I think what he probably did in this phone call is try and explain the situation from his view, which I think is being misinterpreted somewhat in Beijing. Because Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden are both Democrats, I think there is a misunderstanding in China that President Biden can somehow control what Pelosi does, where she travels, what this trip might look like, when in reality, the way the U.S. political system is set up is that there's this division of powers, and so that Congress acts on its own. And he can't necessarily tell Pelosi where she can travel and where she can't travel. And so I think what President Biden is trying to do is to sort of explain that just because Pelosi is considering this trip, it doesn't necessarily reflect a change in the U.S. posture towards Taiwan. But of course, I don't know how acceptive and receptive President Xi would necessarily be to that explanation, because of course Nancy Pelosi is the third in line to the U.S. presidency. She would be the highest ranking American official to visit Taiwan in decades, and so this of course is generating some very heightened tensions between the two countries. And of course U.S. officials have been looking at Taiwan with growing concern even before Nancy Pelosi suggested she might visit there. There is concern that China could be considering making a move on Taiwan within the next year, perhaps. And so I think President Biden wants to both warn President Xi that would be a bad idea, but also try and ease these tensions and explain that the U.S. posture towards Taiwan has not changed at all, even though Nancy Pelosi is considering this trip. She has not finalized her plans, and in fact, she has refused to speak about them publicly. But what we've heard is that this is being planned for the next several weeks, and that, of course, is drawing a huge reaction from Beijing. We'll see whether this call has been able to lower those temperature in any way, but it was certainly something that they were expected to talk about at some length.
All right. Many thanks, Kevin Liptak, for bringing in all those details and putting the entire situation into perspective for us. And with that, let's now shift our attention over to another key geopolitical player, and that is Russia. The country has massively decreased its gas supply to Europe via Nord Stream to 20% of its original capacity. Here's CNN's Claire Sebastian with more details for us.
Well, Russia stayed true to its word Wednesday morning. German network operator Gascade confirming that supplies coming through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline were down to about 20% of its capacity. A major blow, considering this was the pipeline that just a few months ago supplied about 40% of Europe's imports from Russia. Well, European leaders say Russia is weaponizing its energy supplies. The Kremlin, though, for its part, repeating its claim that this is because of a maintenance issue made more difficult and time-consuming by sanctions. And the reality for Europe really is now setting in. Members agreed Tuesday to a voluntary 15% cut to their gas usage, rationing in other words. That will take effect from next week. But questions are already being raised about whether the deal has too many exemptions and not enough detail to ensure that the continent makes it through the winter without shortages. And frankly, it's already too late to avoid economic pain. Amid soaring natural gas prices, the chairman of German chemical giant BASF said on a conference call Wednesday that they are having to reduce production at some of their facilities that require the most gas, like ammonia plants. Ammonia, a key ingredient in fertilizer. The company said it was also passing on higher energy costs to its customers. So soaring energy prices, soaring inflation, and now an uncertain winter ahead as Europe reckons with the cost of decades of reliance on Russian energy. Claire Sebastian, CNN, London.
And with that, let's now shift our attention over to a possible health emergency that the world could be staring at, and that is monkeypox. That's been declared an international health emergency by the World Health Organization and has been reported in over 79 locations around the world. 72 of these are countries which have never reported a monkeypox case in history, while 7 of these countries, all located in the African continent, have reported cases of monkeypox before. Spain, which is one of the worst hit countries, has reported its first monkeypox. And monkeypox-related death has been reported in Spain. It's thought to be the first death linked to the outbreak in Europe. And in India, there's some good news. The first patient to report monkeypox has now recovered, which seems like a huge milestone as far as this health emergency is concerned. But here's also now a quick look at how many cases are we looking at as far as monkeypox is concerned and those locations where monkeypox has been reported. We are looking at a total of 22,485 cases and counting, which have been reported in 79 locations. Let's also take you through those locations on the globe. You're looking at 4,290 cases in Spain. In US, roughly 5,000 cases, 4,900 to be precise. In Germany, 2,590 cases. You're looking at UK, 2,540. Remember, this is what the WHO has had to say, that the Europe and US are worst affected. France having close to 2,000 cases. Brazil, close to 1,000 cases. That's the count that we are bringing to you. Not to forget Canada, 800 cases over there. Maximum, and in fact quite a sizable number of cases also coming from Africa. As far as Africa is concerned, we are looking at cases in the Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and in India, the lowest count so far with 4 cases of monkeypox. And with that, I'd like to slip into a quick break as news and updates continue on World 360. Stay with us.